Good evening. Good evening. I'm very, very happy to be here, and I'm also going to speak in English. I should be able to speak Spanish because I'm married to a Venezolana. Pero en inglés ella muy tranquila y en español ella muy brava. Entonces yo no hablo español. It's really wonderful for me to be here in Chile, as Peter said, the place that it all started, to celebrate Endeavor Chile and to thank you all for your support, and to tell you a little bit about the transformative power of entrepreneurship, which you've seen here, and some new markets and new technologies. But I also want to tell you first a little bit about Endeavor Global. From Peter's dream 20 years ago, when he was masquerading as a Chinese woman, until now, Endeavor is now in 26 countries around the world. We're in 4 US cities. Our entrepreneurs did over $8.5 billion in revenue last year. And we've so far, or the entrepreneurs so far, have created nearly 700,000 jobs. So the organization is scaling dramatically. And it's really been one of the great honors of my life to be its chairman. So let me just tell you a little bit about what I'm going to try and do today, talk about the transformative power of entrepreneurship and new technologies and some new markets. I can't even work this very well, but you know that entrepreneurship has transformative power. Chile is a very good example of this. We've also seen this in Argentina, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that, how new technologies can generate new markets, and the role of capital markets, which is really critical in creating entrepreneurship. This is just a brief chart that says that Chile is leading the way in Latin America in terms of its ability to foster entrepreneurship. Unfortunately, my wife's country is a disaster, and who knows what will happen there, but I hope something good will eventually happen there. You can also see that where wealth is concentrated in a few, where economies are dependent on 1 or 2 industries, those countries do less well, have fewer entrepreneurs, and poorer growth. That also results in a lot of political frustration. So when economies are not growing, people are not getting the jobs that they want and need, they often turn to rulers either on the left or the right, which tend to be poor choices and have hurt economies generally. It's actually one of the reasons why we have the president we have in the United States right now, and I'll talk about that maybe in a minute. But I do want to talk a little bit about what's happened in Argentina, because we see that it's happened in Endeavor all over the world. And I want to take you through that because it's really important for you to understand how critical the role of entrepreneurs and mentors are in transforming an economy. So when you think about Buenos Aires in the last 20 years, it's had a great deal of political instability. It's nationalized its oil company. It's devalued. It's defaulted. And despite that, today you have a very robust entrepreneurial culture in Buenos Aires. So Endeavor, which has its own research department, asked 200 entrepreneurs the following questions. They asked them, who inspired you, who employed you, who invested in you, who mentored you, and have you founded additional companies? And we mapped that over a period of almost 20 years. So if you see here, in 1990, what is this, 1999, there was very little entrepreneurial culture in Argentina. By 2007, that had increased. And I should say that Endeavor Argentina was created in 1998. Is that right, Peter? So in 2007, you start to see the entrepreneurial sector grow. By 2012, it had grown quite a lot. And now through 2014, which is the last time we measured, this is what the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Buenos Aires looks like. What's interesting about this is if you look at the next slide, the companies in orange are Endeavor companies. Of the 6 companies that have really led this whole renaissance of entrepreneurialism in Buenos Aires, 5 of them are Endeavor companies. And this is what the entrepreneurial network and ecosystem would look like in Buenos Aires without Endeavor. So it's clear that Endeavor can make a huge difference in the culture and the outcomes of economies. Now I just want to talk quickly about new technologies and new markets and the role of the capital markets. So first, I just want to talk about Tesla very briefly because it's been in the news recently as having a market cap now greater than General Motors. Tesla, unlike almost all of the success stories of the last 20 or 30 years, is unusual because it does not do what every other successful company has done, which is reduce friction. So if you think about it, we always went to the encyclopedia to find information, now we go to Google. We always went to the bookstore or somewhere else to shop, now we go to Amazon, etc. All these companies did not make humans do things we didn't do before. They simply allowed us to do more of what we already did in a much more frictionless environment. Tesla does not do that. Tesla, in a sense, is just another car company, and it's just as easy or complicated to buy a Tesla as it is any other car. But the market believes that Tesla is going to do 3 things. It's going to continue to produce an outstanding automobile. It's going to break through in the battery market and find a breakthrough that so far has eluded modern science, and that it's going to have a big role in optimizing the electrical grid. Whether that happens or not, I don't know, and we'll talk about the role of capital markets in making that happen. You may have heard about a company that I'm starting called Global Thermostat. Global Thermostat is a new way of sourcing and supplying CO2. But this is a very important breakthrough because we're going to be taking CO2 from the atmosphere and supplying it to industry. So it is the world's first carbon removal technology. And when I first asked the scientist why this was a business, he said to me very simply, in the raw materials business, there are 3 major buckets of cost. There's finding and extracting the raw material. There's the energy to turn the raw material into a sellable product. And there's the cost of transportation to get that product to the customer. In the case of Global Thermostat, our source of CO2 is infinite and it's free. The energy we use is only waste heat, so we use no incremental energy to power our units, which means our energy costs are low or free. And we have no transportation because since CO2 is distributed evenly in the atmosphere. We simply take the CO2 from the air and deliver to the customer next door. We are building our first commercial unit. Right now, we've just started. Our first commercial unit is going to be for Coca-Cola. But ultimately, instead of the current CO2 markets, which are beverages, dry ice, greenhouses, that kind of thing, ultimately, CO2 can do anything, just about anything that oil can do, because we need the carbon. So ultimately, whether it's in agriculture or building materials or plastics, we will be able to make that from the CO2 in the air. And one reason this is important is that there is no distribution or transportation infrastructure that can move the amount of CO2 required to make a difference in the Earth's atmosphere. So just as an example, the worldwide market for plastic packaging annually is 90 billion tons. It takes 2 tons of CO2 to make a ton of plastic. So if all plastic packaging were green, you'd need to move 180 billion tons of CO2 a year. There is not and never will be an infrastructure that can do that. But the atmosphere does it all by itself. So we are really the only technology, and CO2 is the only substance that has the carbon molecule that is close enough to all of the points of use to really be effective. And so what we plan to do is what I call close the carbon cycle, which is we take CO2 out of the earth to fuel our economy, and now we're going to take it back out of the air to supply products and keep that CO2 out of the atmosphere. Now, the importance of capital markets. There's a unique situation in the United States which really does not exist anywhere else, even in Western Europe. And that is that the capital markets are prepared to fund losses. So if you look at Tesla here, Tesla lost $700 million last year. It's going to lose $1 billion this year. And its market cap is greater than Ford or General Motors. Ford, which is making almost $5 billion, and General Motors making $9.5 billion. Now, that's crazy. Or it's not crazy. Who knows? But it only exists in the United States. And it's critical to understand this because, but for these capital markets, Amazon would not exist. There would be no Amazon. Because Amazon, except for the last 2 years, has always lost money. It's lost money so that it could reinvest in its business and grow its business faster. But without the capital markets to support it, it could not be where it is today. In fact, it probably wouldn't exist. And in 2001, 2002, when the tech market crashed, Amazon came that close to bankruptcy. And it was, again, only the capital markets that stepped in. And so while these public markets and public market investors exist mostly in the US, I do think it's really important as we think about growing entrepreneurs and their businesses in other countries that we start talking to bankers and marketeers about sources of capital and how to finance growth companies. Because financing growth companies outside the US is really more expensive than it should be. Because venture capitalists, frankly, assess risk at such a great rate that it's difficult for entrepreneurs to hold on to their companies. Anyway, in summary, I just really wanted to reinforce the power of entrepreneurship, the tremendous power that exists in inventing new technologies to take advantage of new markets. And again, to thank all of you for paying attention to me, for all of you being here, for supporting Endeavor Chile, particularly to Peter Kellner for founding Endeavor in the first place with Linda Rotenberg, and to Christopher Scheuth and Maria for running this great gala and this great Endeavor Chile, and to all of the staff at Endeavor Chile that made tonight possible. I want to say thank you as well. Thanks very much.